happens. I'm doing drone sales in my 20s. Very untapped niche market, right? I got it cornered. I built a ragtag team of motherfuckers like killers, reprobates, fucking misfits, the dispossessed, disenfranchised, disenchanted motherfuckers. Motherfuckers that came from broken homes. Cause look, a lot of these guys that don't have an identity, that, abuse substances, shit like that, they are the best salesmen because they don't know who they are. So they can be anybody. And if you're a good leader and you're like a fucking Julius Caesar type, you can really lead these motherfuckers on some. Here's the deal. Not only can you lead them into glory, but you can also completely overshadow their desire for self-destruction. These guys are malleable as fuck, and also they're extremely fucking intelligent. Any of these dispossessed motherfuckers who are like severely addicted and self-destructive, like, it's misplaced passion, right? So I build a team with this in mind, and we are absolutely tearing the world apart with this business. Okay? I created it from scratch. No one was doing drone sales at the time. So my right-hand man, this motherfucker was a beast, by the way, but he was a fucking meth head. Severe meth addiction. He had been in and out of jail. He'd been fucking dealing drugs. He fucking OD'd a couple times. This motherfucker was an embalmed mummy, though. Could not kill this motherfucker for some reason. He had a fighting spirit. So anyway, I give him a position in the drone company, and he was my right-hand man, and this guy was a monster. Monster on the phones. Little bit of an encouraging push and a little bit of fucking gusto. And if I fucking stayed around him as his fucking superintendent and kind of like whipped him into shape, this motherfucker could accomplish anything. The minute I would take my eye off of him, he would fucking flounder. So these guys need constant, almost like babysitting in a way. But if you stay on top of it, it's the most incredible, well-oiled machine you've ever seen in your life. So anyway, I'm rolling deep with this guy, and we had just had one of the best weeks of our lives. We made a fortune, and we were going back to his house. He was renting this little fucking shack in this sort of back country on these back channel roads. There was literally like a fucking crack den. But he had, I brought him back into my life to clean everything up. Like one of my stipulations was if you use drugs, you're gone. I had a no tolerance policy for drugs, alcohol, shit like that, because I wanted this guy to turn his life around. And he was a little bit younger than me. So he had a very checkered past. He had numerous brush-ins and misdeeds and misgivings with the wrong sorts of people. And I didn't really understand the full scope of it, but I knew a little bit. And I somewhat knew that being around him was going to be a liability to a degree, just because he had not shorn up a lot of his past. So one night around Halloween, we're trundling along on this back country road going up to his crib. And it was around Halloween time, and all the houses, it was a very festive community. Very festive community. You know what I'm saying? Like the skeletons were out, the nooses and shit were hanging from the trees. They had all the fucking, paraphernalia, the fucking jack-o'-lanterns and shit were all lit up. It was one of those deals. And he so he lived in this fucking shithole. It was a dilapidated house. And I'm not kidding, if the termites stopped holding hands, the entire house would have fallen apart. So we're rolling up there, and adjacent to his house was like this very hard scrabble land that was undeveloped, just raw clumps of dirt. And all of a sudden, the windshield to my right, where he was in the passenger seat, I was driving the truck, explodes. It just fucking explodes. And his head explodes into my fucking lap. Explodes into my lap. Chunks of human flesh are embroidered in my fucking t-shirt. I am covered in blood. Covered in blood. Flipping the fuck out. Flipping the fuck out. I'm telling you, like steak tartare that just got fucking penetrated by hot lead was roasting in my t-shirt. Like I could feel the heat of the human flesh caking itself into my fucking t-shirt. Drive-by shooting. Head explodes. I didn't know if I got hit. I didn't know if there was shrapnel. I didn't know anything. All I remember is I put the fucking truck into park and I bolt out the door, and there was this embankment that went down to the left, and there was a massive slope, and below the slope was a highway with a massive speed limit. So I could hear tons of cars below whizzing by. So as I'm running down the embankment, obviously to get the fuck out of there, I'd had no clue, by the way. I didn't know the orientation of the vehicle. I didn't know if it was a drive-by shooting. I had no identification. I didn't know what the fuck happened. I didn't know if it was an ambush. But as I'm running down the embankment, I hear a car making a U-turn coming down, and bullets are still flying. Now, I'm already down the embankment, so they're obviously trying to get me too, right? So I twist my ankle horrifically when I get to the bottom of this slope, and I'm fucked up. I am soaked in blood. I am so disheveled. I am absolutely tremoring and paralyzed in terror at this point. And I'm waving maniacally at the fucking bottom of the highway, and cars are just barreling on. It's a symptom of the times, right? Cars are just, they don't give a fuck. You know what I mean? There's no neighborly, there's no fucking filial piety. Like no one gives a fuck. What seems like 30 minutes passes by, and a trucker finally stops, and he gets out and he calls the police. And I am petrified to go back up the embankment for obvious reasons. So when they get there, they had already set up a scene. And by the time I got up there, I discovered that whoever shot my friend ripped his corpse out of the vehicle and just disposed of it in the middle of the road. Fucking vultures. Just threw his body in the middle of the road and dipped. Now, was the most horrifying night of my life. Cannot put into words. It's not like the movies at all. Cannot put into words what it's like to have the human flesh dispose of itself in your presence. It is beyond the most grisly thing you could possibly comprehend. And when I tell you that I was numb for hours afterwards, because look, like when that happens, your body is squeegeeing as many fucking hormones just to stabilize the system. The shock is so tremendous and so severe. It's almost like a circuit break. Like you really cannot string coherent sentences together. I mean, I was bewildered. I was absolutely besides myself. I couldn't speak. I couldn't fucking do anything. I was completely dispossessed of my body at this point. It was surreal. It was surreal. And I became very tight with his family, with his mom and dad. His mom and dad were very compassionate people. They had given him multiple stints in rehabs. They had really tried to rehab him. And it seemed like I was really the only guy in his life that could kind of rein him in and kind of tame the wild beast. And so we had a very special bond when this happened. And I would meet up with them every now and then. And just, I stayed connected. About 2.5 years later, I got pulled into the station because they thought they had found the guys who did it. And it's one of the most harrowing nights of my life because for that 2.5 years, I lived every day of my life knowing that I had nothing to offer the detectives. I didn't see anything, nothing. And obviously, I stated that many times, but as a formality, I had to go down to the station and they wanted me to try to do an ID. And I get down there, and obviously, I went through the formality, and I had to look them in the eyes and tell them that I had absolutely no fucking clue. Absolutely no fucking clue. It was pitch black. I didn't even really have an idea of the vehicle. I thought I did, but the memories are fragmented. Like I said, it's a full circuit break experience. Everything just shatters. Your memory becomes very fragmented. Horrifying thing to live through. Horrifying. So I think Carl Jung said misfortune comes in threes. And I lose my right hand man. Money starts to get real tight. The business starts to crash because your business problems are always an extension of your personal problems. Your personal problems creep in there and it becomes sort of this necrosis. So I had necrosis seeping into my business because my personal life was in shambles. I mean, this completely turned my world upside down. I was very withdrawn, became very antisocial, was just sort of trying to sort everything out for myself. And people were offering me tremendous amounts of support and groups and shit like that. And I rejected it all. It was just something that I just wanted to kind of deal with on my own. But things got really rough. The business completely tanked, largely probably due to some self destruction on my end. I think I was sort of lashing out and acting out and just kind of wanted everything to burn. But the bottom line was everything kind of came to a breaking point where I was just kind of trapped in this community. I really had nowhere to go. My back was against the wall. Um, I hadn't been dealing with anything emotionally. And so his dad, who I was super tight with, made a suggestion. He made it like a one off suggestion to me one day that kind of pattered around my head for a little bit. And he was like, look, he's like, you have a couple options here. And I was like, what's that? And he was like, he's like, this is going to sound crazy, but he's like, if you're down on your luck, and he's like, you really need a refuge and you need a respite, just sort of a haven just to kind of get your head collected and sort of figure out what your next move is. He was like, you can get a scholarship to a halfway house where basically you're gonna live with like other drug addicts and other alcoholics. Even though I had never at this point in time, I had never experimented whatsoever with drugs. I had no experience with drugs or alcohol at this time. And I was like, so basically you're telling me to basically infiltrate this place and almost pull like a one flew over the cuckoo's nest where I'm just gonna pretend I'm a fucking alcoholic to get housing for 90 days? And he's like, that's exactly what I'm telling you. He was like, the worst thing that can happen is it'll probably help you out. And I just remember him saying that. He said, the worst thing that can happen is it'll probably help you out.